Hey y'all, it's Rick here with Uncommon Communion. Happy Friday and happy Arbor Day. If you have been thinking about planting a tree somewhere, today is an auspicious day to do it. It's also National Hug a Plumber Day. So if you got a plumber in your life, give him a hug. Let us begin as we always begin, recognizing, realizing, remembering, affirming, celebrating that we are always and everywhere in the holy presence of God and each other. If you read my written post that came out today, and also perhaps listened to my video from yesterday, you will know it was a big day and an important day, and actually kind of a surprising day. It I knew I was going to have a conversation in the morning that I had hoped would be fruitful over coffee around a table at a local coffee shop. What I didn't realize is the conversation that would come from that later in the evening. And again, if you haven't read my written post for today, encourage you to do so because that explains that. Well, there was another piece that came up last night that I wanted to connect with a reading that I came across this morning. And it has to do with Easter, right? Easter's theme, of course, if there's an icon or an image that we often use for Easter, it is the empty tomb, right? If there is an image or an icon that we use for Eucharist, communion, it is the table, the altar, right? And I think for me, understanding that the table is such a vital, central part of really everything we do. I kind of wish in the community of followers of Christ that the table was almost more central than the cross. I think the cross is important because it is a portal. It is through the dying of Christ and the resurrection that comes through that portal. So the cross is important. Nevertheless, I think the table is even more important, in large part because it is so relevant to our lives. I was reminded of this last night at this event that I was at, which again was it was at a kind of a restaurant. It was in a back room. It was this individual, Chris Volpe, I believe is the correct pronunciation. Yesterday, when I mentioned his name, I wasn't entirely sure. Chris Volpe. And it was afterwards, I was sitting at a table with this gentleman named Aaron, who is a small business owner of a really wonderful little place, growing place called the Tabletop Game Cafe. And he and I were talking about tables. It's right there in the name. And I love that all games that are physical games, not screen based games, whether they have a board or not, are getting called, kind of categorized as tabletop because I love tables. Tables are at the heart of everything that we do. We gather around tables for our meals almost all of the time. We have a table at the front of most Christian churches, at least the Eucharistic ones, right? And Aaron and I were sitting at a table last night as we had this conversation. And it just warms my heart so much to just know that even in a generation younger than me or two generations younger than me, there is this need for community and for playing games that are not on a screen. And it was kind of funny. Aaron, mentioned one of the things they do is Dungeons and Dragons, and I grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons. It's kind of funny because if you're a fan of Stranger Things, those kids in Stranger Things, that was exactly me. When you look at the age that they are when the series started, anyway, I haven't really been following it to see how much in time it is advanced, but those kids are me. I was one of those kids. Hopefully I wasn't that dorky. I know I didn't encounter any monsters like they did, but Dungeons and Dragons is such a part of my growing up and my development, and I'm so glad that it is for young people today. So I was reminded of table and the resurrection after Jesus begins to appear. It is always around a table, right? He appears on the road to Emmaus, which liturgically I think we read in a week or two. It is at the table that the journeyers, I think it's Cleopas and whoever his companion is, I think that's the name of who's there. It is around the table that they recognize him, right? In the liturgical gospel that is coming up for this weekend, they are at table, they are dining when Jesus appears to them. So again, this idea of table and the resurrection are so closely related to each other. I wanted to share with you a couple of things. One is from Richard Rohr's Center for Action and Contemplation, Reflection for Today. I haven't talked a lot about this, but I read it every day. I'll put a link to today's in the notes for this video, but it is from Brian McLaren. I don't know if you recognize that name, but McLaren has been writing for a number of years now. And he was really one of those early adopters or early namers of what was then called the emerging church or the emergent church. And Pete Rollins, who I am sharing from his parables, he was also one of those. And I think as things have devolved, there's no evolution, I don't think, happening in mainline Christianity. I think McLaren, I know, has gotten even more outspoken and passionate and recognizing the need for what he is describing here. So he says this, and this is just the beginning of the reflection. You can read it yourself. McLaren says, what might happen if every Easter we celebrated the resurrection not merely as the resuscitation of a single corpse nearly 2 millennia ago, but more as the ongoing resurrection of all of humanity through Christ? Easter could be the annual affirmation of our ongoing resurrection from violence to peace, from fear to faith, from hostility to love, from a culture of consumption to a culture of stewardship and generosity. And in all these ways and more, from death to life. Here's a part I like. What if our celebration of Easter was so radical in its meaning that it tempted tyrants and dictators everywhere to make it illegal because it represents the ultimate scandal, an annual call for peaceful and creative insurrection against all status quos based on fear, hostility, exclusion, and violence? Resurrection, y'all, is a form of resistance. It is a form of opposing what we are seeing right now. And it is the ultimate hopeful act. And leaning into it, celebrating it in ways like McLaren invites us to do is powerful. It is threatening if we do it non-violently, and we do it with love, and we do it with joy, and we do it with play, and we do it with dance and music and all of that, because the Christians, and I put that in quote, the hippo-Christians as I call them, they're not living in the resurrection. If anything, they are living on the cross. Their Jesus never rises and bursts forth into the world. As much as they might talk about the Holy Spirit and speaking with tongues and the Pentecost and all of that, that's not where they're living. They're living in the old way. And I have some thoughts on this. I'm not going to do this in this video, but it really kind of came to me yesterday in a conversation, not just that they are living in the Old Testament vision of salvation history, but there's a very specific moment where they are living. And I'll get to that in another post, but I want to think about it more, and I want to devote an entire post to it. But if we live as true resurrection people, recognizing that it is through dying, it is through sacrifice, it is through self-emptying, and love is all of that, that we will be transformed, we will be resurrected. and that we can come to the table. We can welcome people to the table. McLaren goes on to say this at the end of the reflection for today. He says, I can imagine Easter opening a 50-day period during which we constantly celebrate newness, freedom, change, and growth, as we would retell each year the story of the risen Christ appearing in the stranger on the Emmaus Road. So part of every Easter season for us would mean meeting and inviting to our tables strangers, aliens, refugees, people of other religions, people of no religion at all, to welcome them as we would Christ and to expect to meet Christ in them. Yeah, y'all, that's what it's about. That is what a resurrected faith is about. And as I lean more and more into, as I discover, hopefully with some of you in dialogue and conversation, what it means to be a planetary pilgrim on the way of Christ, I think resurrection is at the heart of that. Because if there's anything that a planetary pilgrim who is paying attention to the world, to creation, looking deeply into creation, seeing and feeling the more, if there's anything you recognize, it's that you recognize there is a cycle of life, dying, and transformation, right? The moon goes through it every month. We go through it in the day. Our trees and our plants do that. And we recognize that that is what happens with us as well. I want to end with a prayer that also appears in this reflection for today. It's a rich one, y'all. So again, I'll put the link in here. Highly recommend that you take a look at it. This is from retired Episcopal Bishop and Choctaw citizen Stephen Charleston. Offers this celebratory song for the coming of new life and new hope, new light and hope. So let this be our prayer to move us out. Rise up, faithful friends. Wake up, sleepers in the shadows. Wake up to see bright banners on your horizon. Wake up to see your redemption coming to you, the answer to so many of your prayers, the fulfillment of your dream from long ago. Rise up, faithful friends, to shout the good news to the morning sun. Justice has arrived at last. Mercy has returned. Love has won the day. Rise up, good people of many lands, for this is the moment of change, the time when hope starts to be real and truth begins to speak to every courageous heart. Wake up, rise up, and rejoice. Thank you for joining me. Please share this with your friends, and blessing and good. Be well.